And thank you for joining us today, Miss Ashley. We have Ashley Broadrick, our dietitian, here to talk with us again today because we do have lots of questions from our families about diet and the implications of that. And so we're really excited to have Ashley here today to answer some more of those questions for families.
Thank you for getting this sorted. I'm glad to be here and glad to be chatting with you today.
Sure. So a quick reminder from our first talk, it was probably almost a year ago now. Where can a family look for information about how many calories, what types of food their child should have for any given age, since that is a moving target through the years?
Right. Yeah. So, kind of the initial place I'm always going to send families is going to be MyPlate.gov because it's a very um, easy, user-friendly site that you can stick in age. It'll ask you as an adult and as a teenager, it's going to ask for an activity level, not necessarily with kids, but it just really gives you a good start. So, and like we've talked about before, a plate is really just a great visual, especially for kids. So we can show them how the importance when you're kind of looking at the graphic right now that's on the screen. You can see half of that plate is full of color, fruits, vegetables, a lot of non-starchy vegetables, but a lot of that color is going to equal vitamins and minerals. And a variety of color is going to vary up our micronutrients that we're getting so that we're not really we're just getting that variety in diet, and we can cover a lot with our food. So that's always a great place to start, no matter what the other diagnosis going on. Just a great resource for all families.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So, a common question we get from families who have children on certain types of medication is, what can we do? They're losing weight, they're waking up hungry in the middle of the night. How can we help? Because the medicine is impacting their diet at the common times of day when we expect them to be eating.
Mhm. Yeah, so great question. And I do think, you know, um, this is a super common problem, right? Because in some ways, the medications may treat, um, we're managing symptoms and diagnosis, but then they're also having other effects of kind of telling our brain that maybe it's not hungry, even when our body needs to eat. So, timing of breakfast, it may be that a child's not ready to eat first thing in the morning. So, how can we make that adjustment? If you have a school age child, that may be truly working with the homeroom teacher or the um, whoever it may be to kind of say, hey, he's not ready for breakfast. He's on certain medications. Can we pack like a really good snack that we might could encourage him shortly into the school day to have? Um, Same thing in the afternoon. If we've kind of grazed through the day of school. I know a lot of parents I talk to are like, I pack all this stuff for lunch and it comes back home. Um, Not underestimating this, like an afternoon heftier snack, or like a even one right before bedtime too. So um, I think also it's reasonable to if we're really trying to add some different tricks of getting in extra calories or food, appetite stimulants could be a consideration for kids if their brain, kind of if their hunger cues truly are altered with the medications and things going on. But obviously that's a discussion with the physician with that. I'm going to tell you one thing I just found with one of my kids that's highly active, and I'm really struggling, number one, to get him to eat, but number two, to keep weight on. We have added a higher fat content snack before bedtime. Um, and reason being, your body, if you think of, what are we treating with some of these medications? We're trying to treat attention or we're trying to treat activity. So we're really active during the day, right? So when you're going to bed, your body is shutting down in a lot of ways. So your digestion, golly, digestion and your metabolism is really taking a little bit lower of a cue too. So if we can get a little bit more of a higher fat content at night, then that may stick with us, number one, and help with not waking up in the night, but also help us give a better start to our day. So um, what that looks like at our house is that I may make smoothies. I've gone a little bit more liberal with using even ice cream in the smoothie to get the extra calorie, or full fat yogurt. Um, with my son in particular, circumstantial, we're using like a heavy whipping cream to get the extra calories for him to go to bed. Now, obviously, this is not going to be a fix all for all kids. If you already are kind of struggling with the weight on the opposite end, that we're having to watch calories and look at trying to keep calories out, may not be the best suggestion to go all the way crazy with heavy whipping cream or something very nutrient dense. But even something like I mentioned, the full fat yogurt, peanut butter jelly sandwich, making a smoothie with some sort of nut butter, or even a little scoop of ice cream can be a good idea, just to get a little bit higher fat content while your body's starting to sleep in the night, and it's going to digest it a little bit slower.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for that. I
Yeah.
know that is something that's really hard for a lot of families and trying to figure out that balance.
Mhm.
Um, Now, like you were talking about smoothies, we do have some kids who get to the point where they're just refusing a lot of solid foods, or they're unable to take solid foods. What do you do when families mention that concern to you?
Um, yeah, and it's tricky, right? Because obviously, different ages and stages, we want to have as many foods as we can. We want that variety, but it's not always in the stage or season what we see a child accepting. And so that truly is where a smoothie or a nutrition supplement. So I'll give you just a few examples. Would be something for a kid that you might see, like as an oh my goodness, what's the Ensure version of the kid, like a Carnation instant breakfast, an Orgain, um, Ensure, but the kid version of that I cannot think for the top of my head. I may be able to come up with it.
Right. Are you talking about Pediasure
Thank you,
or
Pediasure. Yes, so
that one?
something
And
of the sort. There's gobs of brands. They're going to be a little bit of a different variety, but for the most part, they've got the same makeup. They've got calories, they've got protein, they've got vitamins, minerals. So really trying to keep um, kids on track while they may be going through stages or seasons that they're not wanting a lot of solid food and not wanting a lot of variation in their diet. So um, definitely something that could be considered. Um, Great homemade smoothies. So that is a way to kind of sneak in some of those different fruits and veggies, just from a standpoint of, again, getting those, not only getting in the nutrition, but also getting in the actual food itself. And so we know research wise that as long as we continue to introduce kids, I would say probably adults too that are willing, but as long as we're continuing to expose kids to it, then we can see changes in nutrition in their taste buds and their willingness to accept things. Far as a smoothie goes, a lot can be hidden in a smoothie. I was actually with a group of kids on Friday and did some nutrition lessons, and we made smoothies. And I was trying to utilize things they might find at school, or might have easy access to. And but one thing that we did end up adding was spinach. And so spinach, honestly, you can get it pretty inexpensive for in a large container at the store. um, you could actually stick it straight in the freezer and pull it out and use it like ice cubes if you're making a smoothie. Um, and the great thing about it is it literally does not taste. So you can add it to a smoothie, and all these kids were certain they were going to be able to taste it and hate the smoothie, and they loved it and they couldn't taste it. And one of the kids at the end said, I said, "Did anybody learn anything?" And he said, "I learned that foods I might not think I like, I can drink in a smoothie." And I was like, okay, that's good. So you can hide a lot in that, but also using whole foods. So you don't have to use nutrition supplements or the already pre made drinks that may be a higher price point than families really want to utilize. Tons of recipe and sources out there for smoothies, and healthy smoothies for kids. So that's where I would definitely kind of point parents to, as a start. You can't completely depend. You shouldn't completely depend on these things or pouches or anything, even though they can be whole food based. You still want to keep working on those solids, and it's hard, and consistency's hard. But those are ways you can kind of continue to work with your child, but then also get the nutrition in.
Absolutely, that's great. And I love that those kids were
Yeah.
surprised about that. And like you said, just these are some different strategies that you can try. Definitely talk to your your child's doctor, if you're having major challenges getting a lot of foods in, just so they can be watching the amount of nutrients and the amount of calories and giving you a good balance there. But I love that.
Yeah.
Um, Now, a lot of kids do struggle with the textures of meat.
Mhm.
How are some other ways that we can get good protein if they're not comfortable with meats at that time?
Um, so I was kind of revisiting this question today because this is one that comes up a lot when I'm with families. And oops, sorry, I lost my screen. I think the best way I can say it is I feel like we live in a very protein centric world. Like all the, major talk, is about protein and how much protein, and everybody needs protein, and protein does all the things. And protein is a really good food. Protein's good for muscle building. It's good for our nervous system. Um, uh, there's It's very important, right? Very important for our organs and all the things. But I do think sometimes I see parents being very, very concerned that their child is not getting enough protein. And the great thing about a child is the reality is they don't need near as much as an adult, right? So you can kind of see on this visual, and it has a very rough estimate of what the recommendations for ages 4 to 8 is very minimal, as you can see. Or at least from a perspective of an adult perspective, right? So we're aiming for far more than what a child needs. And so not, I guess, number one, I would encourage parents to remember your child is a child and their needs are very different than an adult. And so not to kind of feel that overwhelm. But also being recognizing there's lots of sources of protein. So we mentioned before, talking about the nutrition supplements, talking about utilizing smoothies. Great way to get in protein pretty easily, and have a big chunk of it taken away. But there's lots of different sources of protein. So um, listed above, you can see obviously we've got our dairy products. Greek yogurt is a very dense form of protein, I guess. Now, texture wise, you'll have to see if kids may accept it or they may not, but definitely worth a shot. Could be mixed up with something like applesauce or a few fruit puree, just to kind of I guess make it a little bit more liquidy versus real thick. That could help. Obviously, beans and rice, great sources of protein. Um, and cereal. I think a lot of our cereals, you know, fortified cereals get a bad rap for a lot of reasons. But the great thing about fortified cereals is they are actually fortified. So we can get a lot of our nutrition in something that a kid might accept. So, um, so cereals like Total or Honey Nut, or just regular Cheerios, not even Honey Nut Cheerios, but something that's real crunchy and consistent. So we know some diagnosis we see that kids may prefer very consistent crunchy foods, and so that may be accomplished by utilizing a whole grain cereal that may have some protein added to it. Um, Nuts can be a great other source too. So edamame, we've recently, my own family, my kids have started eating a lot of edamame, and they make it now where they dry it. So it's like a nut, but it's super crunchy and super condensed protein. So, like, I think these little packets we get are just a couple of ounces and have 12 grams of protein in them. So, as you can see, in a small child, that's basically almost meeting their daily requirements of protein. So definitely a variety of sources, plant-based, uh, animal-based, that you can find protein, but also just remembering that a child is their protein requirements are very different than an adult.
Yeah, and I think that really helps thinking about protein with different types of textures. Like you said, the crunchy things, there's some soft things, smooth things. There are different ways we can meet those
Mhm.
needs, which
Right.
I think really helps. All right. There are a bunch of other common health worries that I hear about from families, and they're always wondering, what are some natural ways? What are some dietary ways that we can help with these things? So, first one we'll think about is, are there any dietary changes that can help with something like constipation?
Mm. It's so funny. If you had told me 20 years ago when I was in school for nutrition, I would be talking about poop as much as I do on the daily, I would have just been very surprised. But turns out that's a very important body function. And it also helps us gauge if people are eating right and if they're able to eat appropriately, because it is very, very important. Um, so yeah, so constipation can impact a lot of things. Obviously, it can be uncomfortable, but it also can start to alter the intake of a child or an adult alike. That when you don't feel good, you don't want to eat, and then your stomach starts to not really want to receive foods. So really keeping our GI tract on track and working is important. So on the screen, there's a few things we have listed. Obviously, hydration, water. That's just kind of a good basic rule of thumb. Um, if we're dehydrated, um, you're just going to see a higher tendency towards constipation, just because that you just don't have enough fluid as you're trying to do, as the digestive tract is trying to do its job. So that can definitely attribute to constipation. Juices, you know, juices diluted is kind of what we will say, of trying to kind of give kids maybe a little bit of taste to their water, but then not overdoing the calories and the higher sugar content. But in a case that you really are pushing constipation, juice can be a great thing, because of the same reasons that we try to dilute it when we're talking about using it on a daily basis. But again, any of these juices that are listed are going to kind of have an effect that they're going to want to move through your system quicker and can really be good with constipation. Um, Fiber is obviously a huge, critical part of your digestive system. And so, um, if we talk about like eating whole fruits, the skin on the whole fruit has got fiber in it. So that's going to be helpful for our digestive system. Um, Prunes, I feel like you can find those all the time now, just in little pouches. And some of these fruits, I noticed at the store the other day, they've actually started adding a probiotic to the fruit that you can buy. They've got apricots that way, they've got prunes, but again, with the same thought of digestive health in mind. But um, can be very, very good to have on hand, and it's specifically the ones that are listed on the screen. So, what we know about bananas and apples, we actually recommend those for the opposite effect, to try to stop diarrhea or stop GI issues. So, definitely, those are not going to be the most ideal to try to combat constipation. Um, Obviously, yeah, yogurt, any kind of probiotics are also going to be good things. So, really kind of looking holistically at the GI tract and its job and how you can support it. Um, these are all going to be kind of things to try to be mindful of with your kids, and finding those things in their diet.
All right. So, mood can be a challenge, and I think we're all more and more aware of the idea of being hangry.
Hmm.
So, what are some ways that we can try and avoid those times?
Yeah, it's hard, especially with kids. So, even going back to the original conversations of what do we have if kids are not wanting to eat? And so eventually that will catch up with them, right? So, medication induced, like lower PO intake, or that they aren't wanting to eat for breakfast. But eventually their bodies are going to need the energy. And so that's where you can kind of see these just very like changes in emotion or hangry spells, right? So consistent meals and times are obviously going to be helpful. And then also thinking about what those meals or snacks are including. So we want to look at complex carbohydrates, or we want to pair up our food, carbohydrates plus the protein. So we know that a carbohydrate, your body is going to take 100% of that carbohydrate and turn it into sugar. And so that's a good thing, right? Like that this is essentially like putting gasoline into a car. It's the most efficient fuel that we can put in our body. However, it also all carbohydrates are not created equally, right? So if we are drinking a soda and we're drinking a soda by itself, then as I mentioned, your body's going to take that and it's going to turn it into gas or energy. Blood glucose is going to shoot up, but it's also going to come right back down. And so it's going to be very short lived that you kind of get this energy level where adding something to the carbohydrate or choosing a different type of carbohydrate is going to make a huge difference. So let's say instead of a soda, that maybe we did grab like a fruit juice, or we diluted a fruit juice and we put some peanut butter crackers with that. Or maybe we got a piece of fruit and we put a string cheese with that. So string cheese is going to be a protein. You've got your fruit, you're eating your fruit. The protein now slows that fruit in the digestive process down. So you're just slowly taking that sugar out and you're not having that huge up and down. Okay. So, like, I always think of pancakes for some reason. I enjoy eating pancakes, but the reality is, if I eat pancakes with syrup alone, about 30 minutes to an hour later, I'm hungry and I'm really annoyed. And I'm also kind of lethargic because I just didn't really get much good energy, right? So um, I will take, if I take pancakes and I either A, make them whole grain or add some sort of different variety of maybe like a whole wheat flour versus a white flour. So I've added fiber, which is going to slow down the digestion, but also I might add like a Greek yogurt in between the layers of the pancake, and then I might put some fruit on there and then put my syrup. And so I've taken a meal that is enjoyable, but I've just added a few things that might tweak it enough that it's going to help my body slow down the process and kind of soak it in a little bit slower, longer, and it's going to help my mood and my energy level stay a little bit more steady. So those are things that can help. I think as far as like the after school kind of hangriness, because what I'm realizing is that some of these kids go to school and they might eat before 11 o'clock in the day, right? So by the time you're getting them home, um, they've gone quite some time without any sort of nutrition potentially. And so having things on hand in the car that might be shelf stable, but also kind of those combined food groups. So I mentioned peanut butter crackers or a granola bar that has a good amount of protein in it, um, oranges, and maybe, like we mentioned, the edamame nuts or some sort of just nuts in general, a trail mix. So those are a few examples of things that might be helpful.
Great, thank you for that. And that's a great idea with the pancakes and mixing some yogurt and in between and things like that. It can still taste good. You get some of that
Hmm.
extra flavor, but right, you get that energy rush, and then all of a sudden afterwards, it's not so great.
Right.
All right, one more question. How about any strategies to help with sleep?
Oh, good question. So I think again, like a lot of things we've already touched on, obviously trying to keep that food consistent. Um, Bedtime snack. So if you are seeing that kind of maybe waking up in the night and feeling hungry, maybe worth considering adding a little bit heftier of a fat content just to kind of make the digestion slow down a little bit. Um, that could be, frankly, it could be something like a bowl of breakfast cereal, but maybe considering using a little bit of whole milk um, or adding whatever milk you have on hand and then adding something additional to it, maybe a little spoon of peanut butter or something, just to kind of slow your system down with it. Um, I think if you're using caffeine at your house, or if your kids are drinking it, if I know, it may be something that can aid with concentration. But the reality of it is, I know for myself personally, my caffeine cutoff has got to be no later than 2 o'clock, because if not, it's impacting my bedtime routine. It's impacting my sleep. And so, find what that time is for your child, or considering backing it off altogether. Um, would be my definite thought process with that. Or it's a very out every now and then, or woe food is kind of what we say, that um, you might have something with caffeine on a day that you're not having to get up and go to school the next morning, right? So, um, and then I think, thinking beyond diet, what does that bedtime routine look like? So, tons of information out with just kind of the sleep hygiene, and number one, the importance of sleep, which we all know, but the impact that things like screens and a lack of physical activity, lack of getting outside, like, they really do impact our rhythm and our ability to get to sleep. So, when your child gets home, can you add about 20 minutes of outside time? So we know anywhere between the hours and 2 and 4, if you're outside, then that is actually, it's causing an impact that's going to impact your melatonin production levels at night. So doesn't mean they have to go outside and run 4 miles, but truly just being outside, going for a walk, it's going to help your stress level, but it's also going to truly help your body continue to be rhythmic. So when it's ready for bed, you've kind of done a little small part with it. Um, I would think about showering. I would think about music at night. I would think about even like some like magnesium, or some calm drinks, or sleepy time tea. So many of those are just, you know, are they helpful from like a scientific standpoint? I mean, maybe, probably, but they also are part of just a habit you're creating. So I know when I'm getting ready for bed and I make a glass of hot tea and then I settle in my bed and I look at a book for 10 minutes, then that's just helping my body get in a state of what I expect for it to go to sleep. Whereas if I'm running in the door after a super busy day and a busy night, and we've been everywhere all over the world doing sports or whatever it is, and then I'm like, okay, eat real quick, get in the shower, and go to bed, it's much harder for a reset and to get ready for bed. So yes, diet's important, but it doesn't start at 8 o'clock. It's got to be a holistic view of getting ready for bed. So I would definitely think if there's some other kind of routines um, that you could consider at night, that maybe can be something just to change the the rhythm and the habits at night, and establish those early with your child, so that when they get into teenager land and whenever they get into adult land, that they've got these stops and these thoughts and these really habits and boundaries of what it looks like to really get your body in a place that it's ready to rest.
Well, thank you so much for those insights. We really appreciate you joining us again today, Ashley. And here are a few different resources that we put together that families can look for. So hopefully this helped give everyone some more strategies and ideas to try. And thank you again, Ashley, for joining us.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.